Hey guys, in this video I want to discuss forgiveness towards a narcissist. A lot of people, particularly people who do not understand what it's like to have the experience of prolonged narcissistic abuse, will sometimes give the advice that you just need to forgive. You just need to forgive the person and move on. So if you're entangled or you're stuck and you've created a soul tie with a narcissist that you're working on disentangling out of, you're disentangling out of a toxic and an abusive dynamic. And these types of dynamics can be really difficult to talk about. And the reason why is because unless you're talking about what you've experienced with someone who has experienced something similar, you're not going to find an audience that is actually able to understand what you're going through. And this is one of the most traumatizing things about narcissistic abuse, especially covert narcissistic abuse, is it can be so subtle and so hard to put your finger on it. So even though it's degrading you and ruining you and eroding away at your soul, it's hard to talk about it because it's like, how can I even begin to get anyone to understand what I'm going through? And by the way, that is a strategy of the narcissist. The narcissist knows what they're doing to you. They know that they're abusing you in a kind of way that is very covert and subtle and difficult to name, difficult to point to. If they were just physically abusing you, giving you black eyes and stuff, you could just call the police, you could capture it on video. You could be like, look, obviously I'm being abused, right? But the idea with especially covert narcissistic abuse is it's almost impossible to capture the narcissist in the act, so to speak, in a way that can be actually transferred and conveyed to other people. Hey, I want to neatly package up and convey to you what it is that I've been experiencing. Well, it's really hard. And this is one of the tolls of narcissistic abuse, is that you can be going through something so dark and so heavy and yet have no way of meaningfully communicating it to other people so that they can understand. And so it can ultimately be very isolating, where you're going through the most horrible thing imaginable, and it's your voice got ripped out of your throat. You can't even you don't even have the words to say, you don't even know how to even begin to get somebody to understand it. And so bringing us back to our topic today about forgiveness is that the suggestion that you ought to just forgive the narcissist can actually be a form of gaslighting, whether that's coming from the narcissist themselves, or maybe it's coming from a friend who maybe they mean well. Their advice might mean well, but when it actually looks like gaslighting, it can look like that if you're trying to express what you're going through and what you've experienced, and the other person is like, oh, you just need to forgive them, that actually causes more damage to you, because in the process of healing and recovering from narcissistic abuse, forgiveness is going to be one of the last steps that we get to. And I want to talk a little bit about this arc, this process of healing and recovering from narcissistic abuse, and why, if you're still early in the game, let's say that you're just trying to get back to the baseline period of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You're just trying to get food, clothing, shelter, and basic safety needs met. Someone coming along and being like, oh, you need to just work on forgiving them. That ought to be very unwelcome advice, because it can actually produce the effect of making you feel ashamed. It can produce the effect of making you feel oh my gosh, I must be a bad person because I'm not able to forgive them right now. And what I want to do in this video is encourage you to be no, there's nothing wrong with you. If you're not able to forgive the narcissist that has negatively affected you and damaged you, if you're not able to forgive them yet, that's okay. We're going to get there. Don't worry about the fact that forgiveness is not what is naturally flowing out of you yet, because you've been traumatized, you've been damaged, you're wounded, you're in a wounded place. And we're not all just able to just magically forgive someone who has victimized us. So just forgive them is the kind of advice that someone who does not understand narcissistic abuse would advise. And I want to give the following analogy. And this is a graphic and an extreme analogy, but I'm making this extreme analogy just to emphasize a point, okay? Suppose that you are someone who every night there's a person who breaks into your home and physically assaults you. Maybe they beat you up, maybe they sexually assault you, but it happens every night. At the same time, someone breaks into your home and physically assaults you, and then they leave. And you're left in shambles, crying, you're traumatized, you're in the most horrific state imaginable. And you start to piece yourself back together a little bit, but sure enough, 24 hours later, it happens again. They're back in the house and they're beating you up and they're victimizing you. And this happens 2 days in a row. It happens 3 days in a row. It happens 4 days in a row. And you explain what's going on to someone. You're like, oh my gosh, like, this is what's been happening to me. The worst advice that person could give you in that moment would be, well, you just need to practice forgiving them. Do you understand how the suggestion that you need to just work on your forgiveness is sometimes like really inappropriate? It's not the right time for that advice, because why? In this example, you're still in an active situation where you're in danger, and you need to figure out how to get your personal safety, your physical sovereign like safety secured first, where that person can no longer access you. They can no longer break into your home. They can no longer physically assault you. And your nervous system and your body and your psyche can start to heal from these enormous traumas that you have experienced. And then, yeah, maybe after a long, long, long recovery from such intense trauma, then you might be able to reach a point of, gosh, by some miracle, from some place of deep overflowing compassion within the heart, you might be able to feel some kind of forgiveness for that person. Now, this is an extreme analogy, of course, but I'm making the analogy because if you are still actively involved in an entanglement with a narcissist, you are in effect that person who's being repeatedly abused. And until you can get to a safe place where you're like, they can't hurt me anymore. They cannot hurt me anymore. Until you get there, forgiveness is, forget about it. It's off the table. You can't work on forgiving someone who is continuing to actively harm you. And so I want to edify you and encourage you that if you're receiving this, like, you just need to work on your forgiveness, gaslighting, basically. It's not always gaslighting with the intent to harm. Sometimes it's just ignorance. Sometimes people just give bad advice because they don't know what they're talking about, but they want to sound smart and they want to offer you a quick solution so they can change the subject because they feel uncomfortable holding space for you while you're going through something hard. And so they'll just say like, oh, we'll just work on your forgiveness. And then they can pat themselves on the back and be like, look how spiritual I am. Aren't I amazing? And then like, hey, like, let's talk about me now, and just keep the conversation moving. And so this is why I actually recommend that you be really careful about who you actually really open up to about what you're experiencing. Because the unfortunate thing is, we live in a world where not very many people can actually hold space for severe emotional trauma that other people are experiencing. People don't have the resources or the capacity to hold meaningful space for it. So find those people in your life who actually can hold that space and keep them close, because most of the rest of the world, they're gonna do you more harm than good when it comes to your process of recovery from narcissistic abuse. Now, I want to talk a little bit about forgiving the narcissist. Here's the thing. If or when you reach a place of genuinely forgiving a narcissist who has affected your life, you are not going to be forgiving into an apology that comes from them. You're not going to be forgiving into actual repentance and remorse that comes from them in 99% of cases. Sure, maybe there's the rare 1% of case where the narcissist like actually comes to Jesus and realizes how much they've harmed other people and does such an immense amount of work that they're actually able to apologize to you for it. But we're not going to bet on that, right? What we're going to bet on is that the narcissist who has affected you enough to make you click on this video is never, ever going to take responsibility for how they've hurt you. And so what that means is if you forgive them, it's something that you're doing for yourself. You're forgiving them solely for your own sake and your own well-being. You're not doing it to genuinely repair relations with them. Do you see how it would be different if they came to you and they were like, I have realized what a wicked person I have been and how I have treated you. I don't expect you to forgive me. I would not forgive me if I was you. However, I am asking for your forgiveness. I'm sorry. Now, if they did that, I'll bet you we could probably find it within ourselves to forgive them. We might be still kind of like, is this a trap? Is this a trap? Is this just another way that they're trying to get back in to abuse us? But if we could somehow like recognize that it's not a trap, we probably could forgive them, right? But here's the thing. We're not going to get that opportunity. They're never going to say those words to us. And so if we're forgiving them, we're not doing it for their sake. We're not saying, I forgive you, now go be free from your guilt, be free from your shame, and sin no more, as Jesus might have said. We're not doing that. When we forgive them, we're doing it in the privacy of our own psyche. We're forgiving them within ourselves, and it's our own personal business. We're not going to hit them up and be like, hey, I just want you to know that all of those years of abuse that you are not even conscious of and are not even willing to take accountability for, I just want you to know that I forgive you for that. We're not going to do that. We're not going to make that phone call, and we're not going to say that to them because they wouldn't even be able to receive the forgiveness that we're offering them, because in their minds, they've not done anything that requires us to forgive them in the first place, right? So our process of forgiving the narcissist is coming fully from within our own selves for our own sake. Now, I emphasize this point because since we're doing it for ourselves, ultimately we're doing it for our own healing, our own renewal, our own restoration, so that we can go on and make ourselves whole again in order to receive blessings from this life. Since we're doing it for that reason, there's no rush. Since we're forgiving the narcissist solely for our own sake, we're going to get around to it in the timing and in the way that is appropriate for ourselves. And if you've been a victim of narcissistic abuse, you probably understand that it can take as much time as we need it to for the recovery process to happen. And what I mean by that is, if you know, you know. If you've experienced narcissistic abuse, then you know. And if you know, then you know that it can take however long it needs to. This is not a race. We're not trying to score as many spiritual points as possible, where it's like, hey everyone, look at me. Like I forgave my abuser. Because again, to go back to the point I made earlier, most people are not even really to appreciate the fact that we've been in an actively toxic and abusive dynamic with someone. Most people that's going to be lost on them, right? They're not even going to be able to appreciate that in the first place. So why should it matter to any of them whether they are able to realize that we've forgiven the person who was abusing us? What I'm trying to say is it's a completely personal process. It's literally between you, yourself, and God. That's it. That's it. Whether you forgive that abuser, whether you forgive that narcissist, who, let's be honest, as much as we can maybe find it within ourselves to feel compassion for them, to understand how they got that way, we know that they might not change in this life. We that's kind of another thing, that if you have had strong entanglements with a narcissist, you might get this cotton candy advice from other people of don't give up on them, keep praying for them because, maybe they'll change. And it's okay, technically you're right. Technically, yes. Technically, we should never lose hope that someone can find salvation, that they can repent, that they can bring God into their life and cast out the demons of narcissism out of their lives, and that they can go on to live holy and virtuous lives. We shouldn't necessarily completely lose hope that someone will never do that. But at the same time, I think it's reasonable to understand that some people are not going to do that in this life. We are going to go from our birth to the grave knowing certain people who never change. They never genuinely work on themselves. They never actually get in themselves to understand why there are these massive wounds within them that cause and produce narcissistic behavior that is like intensely destructive into the lives of the people who have pretty much made the mistake of getting close to them. So not that it's always a mistake. I understand some people have narcissistic parents and it's like, nothing you can really do about that, right? You didn't choose to be in that relationship per se is what I mean. But I just want to recap a few things here. You cannot forgive someone while you're being actively abused by them. That's you're getting things out of order. If you're still in an actively abusive, actively toxic dynamic, you could actually be doing something dangerous by trying to focus on forgiving that person and putting forgiving them ahead of getting the F out of that situation and getting your life back into a safe situation where you can actually heal and actually build the life that you want away from this essentially predator. If you're being actively abused and you're trying to do this pious, virtuous, look how spiritual I am thing of trying to forgive them while they're actively harming you, all I can say is that if you're doing that, you're basically just saying to them that they can abuse you however much they want. You're saying like, I'm gonna forgive you like while you're destroying me. And I don't think that we're called to do that personally. I don't think that we're called to be a martyr in this lifetime to a martyr of who is essentially destroyed by a narcissist. I don't feel personally that it's my calling to allow a narcissist to destroy me while I sit there being like, namaste, namaste. I love you so much while they're just essentially like pillaging our soul. You understand what I mean? So therefore, since that's not the actual calling, the calling is to get ourselves out of that toxic dynamic and to heal and to live our best life, to get revenge on that person by living our best life and not letting their efforts to destroy us actually succeed. That's the calling, my friends. That is the calling right there. And then, one day, sometime down the road, after we have repaired ourselves and gotten our life back together, then we can be like, you know what? Yeah, I actually feel safe enough in my body, in my own experience. I feel okay enough now that I can start to think some thoughts of forgiveness towards them, to the extent that I feel that I'm capable of doing it, I'm not going to force it. I'm not going to guilt trip myself. I'm not going to give myself lashings because I'm having a hard time forgiving someone who did harm to me. This is not a spiritual competition. I'm not trying to be Jesus Christ in this life where I just have like the most perfect amount of unconditional love and acceptance of everything and forgiveness to everyone, where I'm watching the nail go into my hand and I'm just thinking about like how much I love the person doing it. You don't have to be there. And I know I'm not there. Jesus Christ might have been there. He might have been like, forgive them, Father, they know not what they do. And we can aspire to that virtue of being that loving and that forgiving. But at the same time, we did not come into this life to die for the sins of the world. We did not come into this life to be crucified or to be destroyed by the dark and demonic forces in this world. That's not you and I's mission in this life. It was that man's mission, Jesus Christ's mission. And thank you, God, for sending him to do that work. But you and I, we don't have to do that. We don't have to like put it on ourselves and carry that heavy of a cross, right? We get to heal and we get to move on. And so remember, there's no rush. You're forgiving them as a part of your healing and recovery process. So when you realize that the best thing for you is to practice forgiveness, that is when you can start to work on that part of yourself. That is when you can start to say, you know what, like, okay, I'm out of that situation now. I haven't talked to that person in a while. I know they can't hurt me anymore. I've learned my lessons from that experience. And even though it's still painful for me to think about, I think I can finally start to lean into the edge of forgiving them and wishing them well from a distance. I'm not going to get back in contact with them. I don't wish to see them. But from a distance, I feel strong enough now to send them some kind of loving vibration. That's the place that we're trying to get to. That's it. And don't let anyone tell you that you need to rush to get there. Don't let anyone make you feel bad for not being there yet. They don't know what it's like. Listen to me. These people who are telling you, oh, just forgive them, they do not know what it's like to walk a mile in your shoes. They have no idea what you've gone through. They have no idea. None. In a best case scenario, they can barely even take an educated guess. They barely have any capacity to offer you any advice. So again, be careful who you let into your inner world, because not everybody knows what they're talking about. Most people are pretty much useless, unfortunately. I'm sorry to say, but it's true. Most people are able to offer almost no genuine spiritual nourishment to anyone, because we're just not, we're a mess as a species. So as part of your healing process, keep it close. Realize, look, I'm going to open myself up and talk about what I've experienced to only a select few people who I can really trust to be able to hold good, safe space for me. And in terms of forgiving, I'm going to focus on how the person who benefits from that act of forgiveness is me. The forgiveness is something that is going to help me heal and get my life back to where it can be. We're not doing it to try to save the narcissist or anything like that. It's not about them. All right, I'm going to leave it there. If you want, you can click the link in the description on this video and schedule a free 30-minute narcissistic abuse recovery coaching session with me. I like to help people be able to be with their own internal experience in a way that's safe, in a way that's supportive, in a way that they know, look, we got this. You're going to be okay. I'm here. I'll hold a little bit of space for you for 30 minutes if it helps put one foot in front of the other to help climb out of the pit of narcissistic abuse. So as someone who gets it from firsthand experience, that's something I'm happy to hold space for if you feel that I can support you in that way. Thanks for watching this video. If you've made it all the way through, I would love it if you give me a like and a subscribe. God bless you. And if you're a survivor of narcissistic abuse, stay strong. Don't take it lightly. It's heavy, heavy stuff. Heavy stuff. And we got to take the process of recovering from it seriously, because nobody's going to do the work for us. Nobody is going to help us get out of that pit of narcissistic abuse magically overnight. We need to pray and to work on a daily basis to heal. So don't let anybody tell you that, oh, well, you just need to forgive them. Like, clearly you just need to forgive them. Like, no. You're going to do that when it suits you to do it, period. So don't rush. Don't rush your healing. You can't rush it anyway. So, all right, God bless you. Take care.